Good evening, dear friends, dear colleagues. It is my pleasure to start the last event, the last surprise. People who are doctors have more than one talent. It is not their ultimate choice to be doctors. We've learned that. And we have amongst us people of various talents. And I will first read the disclaimer and then I will introduce the performer. Dear friends, to introduce our first act, I was asked to read this as it is written, word for word. The following performance falls under the domain of art, and as such, it is not subject to potential litigation if, despite this broad disclaimer, indeed a suit is brought before the court. The statements you are about to hear do not represent the view of our department, fellow colleagues, organizers, or attendants of the course. That applies even to the performer himself. So now that this has been made abundantly clear, please welcome to the stage our colleague, at least at this time of this, Žan Trontelj, assistant teacher at the Department of Family Medicine of Ljubljana, and admire his talent.
Thank you, Nena, for such a confidence-inspiring introduction. Glad to hear you all have my back. For those of you that are confused here, you may be looking at an inspiration for this year's topic. As humble as I come. A quick recap. 2 years ago, I had a stand-up lecture, a performance, a monodrama, if you like, about comedy in medicine, where I discussed and joked about my mom killing herself. If that sounds confusing, I get it, but I assure you, it was the bomb. And by that, I mean the cathartic experience of talking about it in that manner, not the way she did it. That was a good old-fashioned hanging. I mean, we're Slavic. We either drink or hang ourselves to that, not go boom. It takes a while to prime an audience to laugh at something this morbid. So those of you that weren't here, you have some catching up to do. And better do it quick, because things will go south soon. But before that, just 2 more quick disclaimers. First, this is being taped and will be published online and viewed by hundreds of people that I personally ask or feel otherwise obligated to do so. And second, if you have so-called thin skin or a propensity to be easily offended, now would be the good time to take that bathroom break you wanted. Make it a long one. Hell, join the smokers. I hear good things. All I'm saying is this will take a while. Anyway, the routine stuck and somehow got accepted as a workshop at last year's EURACT conference, where it sparked the debate on my mental health. Apparently talking about and even joking about difficult subject, it's not a clear sign of moving on. Looks like opinions differ even amongst experts. I was given a spectrum of comments, from invitations to participate in suicide prevention programs to questions about my own sanity, all from the people I know and respect as experts in all things psych. You know, psychiatrists, ologists, therapists, iatric patients, the whole spectrum. For those of you that are worried, I have my own suicidal tendencies firmly in check. I even got a semicolon tattoo. And what is infinitely more important, I'm openly talking about difficult times in my life, which I found is the best prevention. Anyway, back to the workshop at the conference. A huge success, at least in my book. The second thing to go off the table after Eva's medical escape room. This speaks volumes. First, our department seems to be filled with brilliant individuals. And second, I'm terrible at being humble. That doesn't seem to bother you guys, though. Not only you declined my invitation for a prolonged bathroom break this year, a lot of workshop participants were the same people that saw my original stand-up a year before. Listen, if me speaking about this raises some red flags for those psych people, imagine their views of someone willingly subjecting to it. Twice! And that was knowing that most of the material will be recycled. For real, I was asked numerous times if I'm going to repeat the same performance from the year prior. And I answered, sure. I mean, none of my other relatives died in the meantime. I'm kidding. Of course they did, but none of the important ones. But when they do, I assure you one thing. I'm going to be the one joking around inappropriately early after the fact. And I hope you do too. And that was a take-home message. At the EURACT conference. Laugh at the dead people. You know what? Maybe those psych people were right and I need help. Nah, I tried both, laughing and crying. And I'll tell you something. Laughing is much more fun. It's easier to digest. And people have a better idea how to react to it. And the second important thing I learned, funerals are not the best place to explain this. Especially to the grieving family members. That's what I missed. The high of getting you all to laugh with me. And losing your place in heaven for doing so. Totally worth it, right? Yeah, I missed that high. I remember how I felt after that performance 2 years ago, and how the feeling carried on to the pizza place and the hotel afterwards. And after an evening night like that, a good night's sleep usually follows. Not for me, though. Just when I was falling asleep, I got a phone call from my partner letting me know that she's on the way to the ER because her daughter was in respiratory distress. Those of you that were here probably remember this story. Victoria was 1.5 years old at the time, and that was her first episode of bronchiolitis. She was hospitalized, and the next couple of days recovered enough to accept me as a staying parent. So my then visibly pregnant partner could get home and get some much-needed rest. It's hard to describe the dichotomy of emotions of looking at Victoria with her oxygen mask on. Because on one hand, of course you're glad that she's gotten used to it and is getting better because of it. But on the other hand, you feel so bad that she has to have the damn thing on in the first place. And the first night while I was laying next to her thinking these thoughts, she started tossing and turning. While she got used to all the tubes and cables around her, every now and again she still tried to break free, like the queen that she is. And the oxygen tube started wrapping itself around her neck. That got me thinking how life is full of irony. Because a single tube can't help and prevent you from breathing at the exact same time. And second one, well, this one's bad, I warn you. She almost went out the same way her grandma did. Yeah, kind of expected this to be too much to laugh on camera. But I assure you, people watching that from the privacy of their own home are laughing much louder than you are. Still going to hell, though. For real, you can relax, she's okay now. Well, she still has me as a parent, but otherwise, she's fine. And what do you think I did? Obviously, I untangled her. That one was easy. But right after that, I got up and wrote down this joke. This was the first joke of this set, and I warn you, it's not even the worst one. Those are yet to come, if I'm not asked to stop or like flat out tackled. I like taking risks. Never thought that lecturing would do so much to fulfill this desire. But ever since that first stand-up, I've been pushing the envelope at other conferences. Last December, I was invited to give a lecture titled "What's Bothering Us in Our Everyday Lives" at the Hypertension Conference. I accepted, but only under 2 conditions. First, no abstract was to be expected from me. And second, I don't have to talk about hypertension. Well, somehow they accepted. And what follows was an honest response to the titled question. I was so worried about what I was about to say that the only person I asked for an opinion was Matea Bulc. Those of you that know us both know how bad it must have been. For real, I knew she was the last person to ask me to censor myself, and surely I'd get an honest opinion out of her. And not only she fully supported the message, she even added a couple of ideas to spice things up even more. I love you, Matea.
Okay.
Didn't say public support. So. And I delivered it, full of bravado. I touched on the role of family medicine in our system, the lack of respect it gets. I called the past and present decision makers social parasites, and either incompetent or ignorant for not listening to our pleas and suggestions for changes. Went on discussing the role and legitimacy of pharmaceutical companies in conducting research and writing guidelines for chronic non-communicable diseases. You know how hypertension, diabetes, and dyslipidemias are a godsend for them. All at the event heavily sponsored by pharmaceutical companies that make drugs for hypertension, diabetes, and dyslipidemias. It wasn't meant as a career suicide. I managed to turn things around and focus on quarterly prevention, lifestyle medicine, and health promotion. I mean, I'm provocative, not stupid. Interestingly, the lecture, speech, was well accepted by almost everyone. Maybe not the pharma people, but everyone else. Even the organizers. Even in the talks of actually giving a lecture of lifestyle medicine this year, which I count as a huge win. Well, the reason I started this was not to brag. Okay, not only to brag about my daredevil speech, but to address a bigger issue that came in the shape of a petite, blonde internal medicine specialist. This colleague, and I'm being very generous with the use of the word here, was there for one thing and for one thing only. To get revenge on the whole field of family medicine, because a couple of our real colleagues and doctors, with medical knowledge and professional integrity, reported her for her malpractice. The reason being, she insisted they were obligated to prescribe GLP-1 agonists for weight loss because she said so. Mind you, that was and still is an off-label use in Slovenia. You might be asking why she didn't fill out the prescriptions herself. As did I, but I'll get to our conversation a bit later on. Let's start with the family medicine bashing. She first spoke up when the topic of weight loss and medicinal help came up. She called us ignorant and afraid of medication. A couple of lectures later, she spoke again, commenting how most GPs have never heard of apolipoproteins, let alone their role in metabolism. Her final comment brushed upon, what exactly? Oh yeah, Framingham and score charts and how we don't have a clue what they are. I really hope I'm painting a vivid enough picture that will justify what is yet to come. Listen, I'm the last person to keep quiet. But there were a couple of senior colleagues in the audience with bigger names, and I waited for them to speak up. They did, and the situation was somewhat diffused. Plus, I had a career-ending lecture ahead of me, so I decided to fight one windmill at a time. During the break, I stepped up and asked if she'll be staying till the end, because I think she would learn a huge deal from the lecture that I'm giving. Organizers optimistically put me at the end of the Congress, a sort of attraction to keep as many attendants from leaving early, which worked about as well as expected. Of course, she said that she won't be, but showed interest by asking, what topic am I covering? It was then that I outed myself as a family medicine specialist and asked why she holds such a grudge against us all. I was left with two distinct impressions from that conversation. First was the deep and profound sense of pride that I kept things civil, and I didn't start the conversation with calling her a butthurt Barbie. She was, by all means, looked like one and acted like one. You know, the 45-year-old who looks 55 trying desperately to look 35. You know the type. Managed to hold that out for almost a year. Also watched the actual Barbie movie in the meantime and found out it exceeded my expectations, but more on that a bit later on. The second outtake was how quickly I regretted starting that conversation. Those of you that know me know that I'm a very opinionated person, and I love discussing different views and ideas. Not with her, though. It took me about a minute of her banter to realize she's not only ignorant, but batshit crazy. For real, in the next couple of sentences, she managed to call our colleagues unethical criminals for not prescribing the therapy she suggested. Then went on saying how sorry she is she's not taking statins ever since she was 20, and continued comparing the cumulative effect of statins with, I quote, you know, the money you have in fund, shares and bonds, and finished bragging how successful she is at her anti-age clinic. So many warning lights went on that I thought that triggered an epileptic seizure. Wouldn't mind one at that point, honestly. And while I'd love to dissect each and every argument, I knew she wasn't ready to hear any of it. Real, I could see it in her Botox-filled or surprised-looking face. My colleagues told me that my body language sent a pretty clear message. I threw my hands up in surrender, apologized for seemingly studying different medicine that she did, and walked away confused that someone like this still has a medical license. And after being reviewed, mind you. And even though she wasn't ready to listen to me, I knew someone else will. You guys. So let's start with the biggest nonsense of them all. Anti-aging medicine. What does that even mean? As if modern medicine doesn't play God enough? A couple of hundred years of tradition going against millions of years of evolution? Now we're trying to anti-age? How? If we're not talking about changing the date of birth on your ID card, it's either A, lifestyle medicine, or B, complete and utter bullshit. Or yeah, C, abortions. Hey, as anti-age as you can get, right? All the creams, pills, injections, surgical procedures to make you what? Younger? Prime example of fighting a physiological and honestly mostly psychological battles with chemical warfare. We do have medication for that, but they're prescribed by psychiatrists. Or you know, common sense. Healthy lifestyle and self-care on one hand and tyranny of health on the other. And wouldn't you know, who had those as topics? Drug-peddling, anti-aging, revenge-seeking internal medicine specialists? No, we did. Anti-aging medicine, what a crock of shit. I mean, try working out, eating better, getting enough sleep, de-stressing, getting off social media, and not being an abysmal human being. That's anti-aging. All the rest, marketing idiocracy. And the next thing that got me was how casually she threw in, you know, the money kept in fund, shares, and bonds, as if that's something that's ubiquitous to our field. Listen, I'm a family medicine specialist in his mid-30s with 2 small children. We don't have fund, shares, and bonds, but loans, debt, and mortgages. Coupled with crippling anxiety over our decaying public healthcare system. Fund, shares, and bonds. It's like we work in different industries. Oh wait, we do! And to top it all off, later I found out she was one of the loudest anti-vaxxers during COVID. Thought those people don't trust Big Pharma, let alone sleep in the same bed with them. And the thought that she had the audacity to call us unprofessional, ignorant, and uneducated. Sucks for her. I'm a very observant individual. Petty, also vengeful, but observant as well. You can tell a lot about a person from the type of shoes they're wearing. Remember how I took you for a barefoot walk last year? Quite fitting, right? If I'm on one end of the spectrum, the kumbaya singing, tree hugging hippie vegan, well, maybe not the vegan part. All the delicious animals that I consume on a daily basis would beg to differ. Well, she's on the other. I had the pleasure of sitting right behind her for the conference, and I noticed one thing after she spilled her guts for the first time. Those beautiful high heels she had on were so uncomfortable, she took them off the second she sat back down, each and every time. That tells a lot about a person. The vanity on one hand, and the pure willingness and determination to stand during breaks into something so uncomfortable, just to look younger, I guess. That extrapolates wonderfully to all the things she did to her face. And more importantly, what she's willing to put her patients through, just to look younger and slimmer, not actually be healthier. but just look the part. And that's the biggest difference between us. Compared to how I feel, I do not care one bit about how I look. It's kind of obvious. If this by any chance reaches her, here's the take-home message. If looks are all you have to offer to this world, the next time, think twice before shitting on my speciality. Because these people, my colleagues, my friends, my tribe, are not just laughing with me, no. They're laughing at you. And if this somehow warrants a public response from her, just remember how high I've set at the bar, bitch. Because I do not want to be misquoted, before I was rudely interrupted by your cheers of undying support and admiration, or deafening silence, had to prepare for both options. What I actually said was, remember how high I've said that Barbie's a wonderful movie that warrants more respect, and I apologize deeply to the creators for comparing the title character to our insufferable colleague. The real Barbie has much more depth. I'm sorry, I had to get that off my chest. Otherwise, I'm a positive person, always trying to see the bright side. I like optimism, delivering good news, and spreading happy vibes all around. Sucks being a doctor with those traits, though. Working in medicine, we tend to give out more bad news than good. For real, nobody comes to us because they feel too good and we tell them you have impeccable health and we live forever. No, it's usually the other way around. I still try to package the bad news as not the worst news. For example, what you have is technically cancer, but it's really not the bad kind. For real, if I had to choose for myself out of the cancer catalog, I'd go with what you have. Scars are cool, don't worry. You just need a better backstory. Relax. Nobody uses both of their testicles, not all the time. It takes some serious time and effort to build relationships to the point of being able to use the type of humor that I'm into. I mean, I don't start my conversations with people in wheelchairs asking them about their interest in doing stand-up comedy. I'm not a sociopath, come on. I do, however, throw in a harmless joke or two and see if they want to play ball, figuratively. Those they do appreciate the time, the effort, the risk, the humanity of the informal interactions. It's interesting to see how the view of humor has changed throughout history. Somewhere, somehow, we began taking each other way too seriously. For real, historically speaking, tragedies and dramas were perceived as something more sophisticated, and comedies as just another way of killing time. And using humor in medicine? Forget about it. Luckily, people like Patch Adams and organizations like Red Noses exist to prove how wrong the prudes of history were. It's hard, however, being funny and professional or informative at the same time. For real, this is my best attempt, and the results are mediocre at most. Only the greats have accomplished that. Don't get me wrong, being funny and stupid is easy, but people tend to get fed up with you real quick. On the other hand, it's easy to unleash your expertise on the unsuspecting audience and kill it with boredom. I know, I've been there, went through med school. Most of it without a smartphone. Counted all the tiles, corners, cobwebs, and spiders. Double-checked it with my colleagues. It was honestly one of the initial inspirations to get into teaching, seeing how large the gap there was between what was being done and what could have been done. Quite similar to listening to me versus an actual comedian. No room in the budget, I'm afraid. That brings me to my next and possibly the most controversial topic of this set. Mind you, I wrote this fully aware who my audience is tonight. creme de la creme of family medicine academia. Teachers that get together once a year at a picturesque location and discuss who, what, and how to teach. And that's been going for more than 3 decades now. How cool is that? Round of applause, maybe? No? I'm so grateful to be a part of it for the 8th year. Teaching is something that I'm really passionate about, and I love exploring different ways of doing it. And I'm truly honored to have the opportunity to learn from the best and have such an amazing department that sees the potential in younger colleagues and helps us grow. And to the members of this department, I apologize. Because you've heard what I'm about to say multiple times, but I have to just one more time and I'll leave it alone. I promise. Here it goes. Why does academia have to include research work? Yep, I'm going there, but please hear me out. Listen, I support, understand, even admire proper scientific research. At the same time, I hate doing it myself. Hate it! It's not my type of creativity and requires skills that I do not possess. And what is even worse, I have very little desire of possessing. I respect good researchers and I see how vital their role is, but at the exact same time doesn't mean that they are good teachers. On the other hand, I've gotten to know quite a few talented teachers whose potential is wasted by not wanting to go through with the PhD process, which is the minimum requirement to teach at the university level. And yes, I've heard countless of arguments for quite literally everyone. Why is it like this? But I'm far from at peace. The best one I'm clinging on to is that it's just how it is and that we all find passion for research work sooner or later. Being around halfway through with my PhD, it looks like I fall on the far end of the later part. What I was surprised that nobody mentioned was how the whole structure of academia, from the narrow top to the wide bottom, resembles something that's very illegal in every other field. It's kind of a pyramid scheme. Yikes, I know, but just think about it. We spent countless years studying to obtain some super exclusive title, the PhD, the Doctor of Philosophy, the pinnacle of education. And what can we do with it? Mentor others on the path to get one as well? Now, for real, the more people you mentor, the more articles get published with your name on it, the better for you. Come on! And don't get me even started on the whole publication process. Don't worry. This is not an overly elaborate resignation letter delivered in the form of stand-up. Which you gotta admit would be pretty cool. And after what I've said tonight, maybe even necessary. But I emphasize, this is not my intent. If I'm not present at the next year's course, you know it's not by my choice. Well, if this stand-up thing takes off and I have my own Netflix special, but otherwise, no. If that be the case, though, I want to touch on 2 subjects I mentioned at the beginning and are kind of connected. Taking credit for this year's course, title at least, and lack of humility on my part. So let's start with the first one. Last year's Bled course was scheduled a couple of weeks before the EURACT conference, and Vesna gave me a huge shout-out by casually sliding in the information that there will be a workshop at the conference hosted by yours truly. That planted the seed for later suggestions, and there were more than a few similar to this year's topic, humor or comedy in medicine. Being the online group facilitator for the last couple of years, the organizing committee lets me sit at the grown-up table. And I saw how they liked the idea and decided to expand it to the role of emotions in family medicine. Upon hearing that, I got hooked. I started doing research willingly about the humor part. I even thought about changing my PhD topic. Come to think of it, that may be the closest I came to actually enjoying the whole research process. Well, turns out that the university really isn't fond of changing already approved topics. And by that, I mean they go out of their way to make your life miserable if you just think about it. So I'm back at pretending I care deeply about asthma. I'm kidding, of course I do, especially my own. And what looks to be at least half of my descendants. Plus, I have two wonderful mentors in Danica and Jaime and support from the IPCRG, so I consider myself lucky. And kind of obligated to make this clear. That's how I gave up on doing a deep dive to the topic of humor in medicine, at least for now. And what I did was turn my attention to this, public speaking and selling it to you as entertainment. Even though it may not seem so, even I suffer from the imposter syndrome every now and again. I mean, who the hell am I to take a huge chunk out of your evening and talk? Not listen, just talk about whatever I want. Half an hour for what seems to be like my fifth hobby. Then I remembered the second part of this closing argument. The lack of humility. The disinhibition. Some may even call it narcissism. Whether you want to admit it or not, an important part, if not the prerequisite, to do what we're all doing. Maybe not as much as entertaining, but lecturing, public speaking, teaching in general necessitates the confidence that you must be the best person for the job at a given moment. Or at least one of the best. Okay, one of the best that are actually willing to do it and have PhDs. Have I narrowed it down enough for you to agree with me? Thank you. But there's a difference between lecturing on the subject you're an expert at and just entertaining. It's the footwork you put into becoming an expert at the subject. Yeah, I know the whole research I cried about earlier, and I kind of answered my own question from before. But let the record show, I did it through creative writing and not the scientific process. You may be wondering what's wrong with me. Yeah, I've been looking into that one as well. And while there are certain aspects of narcissism I openly admit to, my biggest problem is that it's named after someone else. You know you made an impact on society if a disease, a disorder, a syndrome is named after you for actually having it and not just discovering or researching it. For real. Alzheimer, Parkinson, Huntington, Down, Crohn, Hodgkin, Asperger, Tourette, Addison, Turner, Klinefelter. We're all physicians. And those were just the first 11 that popped up when I was thinking about it. Why 11? Well, I got to 9 and thought of Turner and Klinefelter and figured they shouldn't be separated because they make sort of a perfect pair. You require basic understanding of human genetics to get it, but a decent joke, nevertheless. Going for a very niche audience here. There are some very rare conditions named after patients themselves. The most famously probably being the Munchausen syndrome, which is named after, I quote, a fictional character who is loosely based on a real person, with practically the same name and only with exaggerated traits, kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy going on there. Then there's Lou Gehrig's disease, which is named after a retired, deceased American baseball player, which is probably the reason that most of the rest of the world outside the States knows the disease under the name ALS. Other than that, there are some very rare diseases, such as Hartnap, Mortimer, and Mikado Joseph, which are named after the patients and or their respective families. And my deepest respect goes to Dr. Barron, Dr. Hutchinson, and Dr. Coutinho for naming the disease after their patients and not after themselves. A small digression here. I'm terrible with names, so all of this took some serious time and effort. And before... Thank you. And before I get accused of doing proper research for this stand-up, all of it was done using Google, Wikipedia, and artificial intelligence. I did not do any unwarranted scientific research, I swear. Then there's one more group that fits the bill perfectly. Autoeponyms, which are the disorders named in the honor of a physician who was affected by or died as a result of the disease he identified or discovered. The examples include rickettsiosis, Thompson's disease, and Carrion's disease. And while Dr. Ricketts and Dr. Thompson were already doctors, Daniel Alcides Carrion was a medical student who died proving the link between Oroya fever and Verruga peruana or Peruvian warts, which are caused by Bartonella bacilliformis infection, with which he was voluntarily injected by his fellow colleague, who was later arrested for his murder, but then released at the end. True story. That makes you wonder, doesn't that deserve at least an honorary title and not just a disease name? Come on, dudes did some serious scientific research. Didn't publish it on account of being arrested or, dead. But proved their hypothesis pretty conclusively. No honorary or posthumous PhDs though, nope. You can literally put your life on the line and lose it in the process of proving a new scientific fact. But if you didn't do the systematic literature review beforehand, or publish an article afterwards, it apparently does not count. And to answer the question, some of you may be asking, yes, this is what I have been doing instead of my PhD research. Time well spent, I know. I've come to terms with it. My mind goes where it wants and it takes me for a ride. I may be pushing 40s, but parts of this thing right here are still very juvenile. If that comes around and bites me, then so be it. I only ask you one thing. Let the pettiness, in combination with this inhibition and complete lack of priorities, all riding on hyper-functioning ADHD mixed with very selective OCD coupled with bipolar disorder and hypofrontality, at least carry my name. Because my scientific research sure as hell won't. I'll end this with a toast. They say that revenge is a dish best served cold. So to the bland and burdensome, bitterly belligerent, balloon-breasted, budget brain Barbie bimbo, I wish bon appetit. And to the rest of you, cheers. Thank you.